Hey there, my name is Chris Acton with Acting Creative, and this is A Handwoven Experience. And in today's episode, well, we're gonna do something a little different today. You see, I've had this idea for a while to do a rigid heddle loom versus multi-shaft loom episode. And as I thought of how I wanted to put it together, I kept coming back to my friend Michele Marshall to be just the girl to talk about rigid heddle looms with me. So it's kind of a casual conversation as we talk about each of our looms, the strengths, the challenges, and at the end of the day, they're both wonderful. They're both means to an end, which is to be weaving. So without further ado, please enjoy this episode of rigid heddle looms versus multi-shaft looms. So everyone, welcome Michele Marshall to Handwoven Experience. We're so glad that she's here. She is going to act as our rigid heddle consultant for our very special episode today. So we are going to kick things off with one of the hot questions. What is a heddle? Start us off, Michele. For your rigid heddle loom, what is a heddle?
This entire piece.
The whole piece.
Oh, the whole piece. We call it a heddle.
Yeah. Amazing.
The manufacturers call them reeds, but they call them rigid heddle reeds. But in common parlance, we generally refer to them as heddles.
The whole thing is a heddle. See, I did not know
the whole
that.
thing is a heddle.
I didn't know the manufacturer referred to as a reed because for us, these pieces here are heddles.
Right.
So that I think is one of the biggest kind of bridges across is what does that mean for you? Confusion. Right, exactly. Because this piece here is a reed, which our reeds have, you know, just they're all slots. They're all empty versus the heddles here have a different function. There's a little eye in the middle that's going to grab one yarn, and that's how you're going to make your pattern. So
you thread every thread through a heddle eye, right?
Yes, one thread through each eye. Yes. Okay.
So we have the heddles, individual heddles in here. There's like X number of them in this particular width. They all have eyes, but we also thread the slots too. So we thread the eyes and the slots.
And the slots. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Which is how it doubles as a reed, because then I take this and beat with it.
Yes. Yeah, because it's kind of like it's all mashed into one function versus mine is broken up, because we have, this is controlling the spacing and this is controlling the separation. So let's just roll right into that then, Michele. Can you kind of show kind of how your loom, how you weave on your loom? Just kind of a loose, a loose representation for us.
So basically, we've got a front beam and a back beam. So we've got apron rods just like y'all do. Yeah. So we tie on, we wind on, and we typically before we wind onto the front, we obviously have to thread like you do. A lot depends on what weight of yarn you're using and how you're threading though. If I thread 2 ends for every hole and slot, I can actually do all my threading in one step. And I direct warp. So you can indirect warp on these. I've done it. But we actually have a peg sticking way out here yonder. That's the length we want our warp to be. And then we bring the yarns through the slots, and then we wind on the back beam, cut them, and then thread through the holes as needed.
Oh, so you do it in 2 different steps, the slots versus the holes?
We can. We should. Okay. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. If I'm using a yarn that's doubled, so I'm pulling like an 8-2 off of a cone and I've doubled it, I'm going to bring it through the slot and I'm going to take it through the hole. And then it's one step warping, measuring, and threading all at once. It's how we put on our warp so fast.
See, that's amazing. Okay, because with this style of loom, this is a 4-shaft table, 15-inch, right? The width of the fabric. That's how you get that measurement. So we have this piece in the front, the reed that we talked about briefly, right? And this is how everything is spaced. But then each yarn gets assigned to one of the 4 shafts. Right. And to separate them, then we're gonna see how it lifts. That's how each of the shafts then are gonna separate the yarns so that you can throw a shuttle through. It's a slightly different thing. But I love the fact that you brought up the direct warping, because I had never heard of that before I met you and the rigid heddle community, because we have, there's a whole bunch of steps. There's a whole bunch of steps. And for us, the big debate is always, do you dress a loom from front to back or back to front? I didn't even know that direct warping was an option before I met some rigid heddle weavers, which is fascinating that you just put a distance out there and just right through.
Yep.
Does that limit how much you can put on though, Michele?
The limit for how much you can put on is the thickness of the warp on the back beam and whether it will interfere with it clearing sheds in the front at the Heddle / reed.
Okay, so it's kind of the design of the loom then, kind of
the loom itself.
Okay.
I have put as much as I think I've done 7 yards on this one. Now,
wow,
on my big loom.
Okay,
so I have a 24-inch over here. This is a samplet. It's a little bit shorter. It's kind of like a car. This is more like a regular like economy car, and the bigger loom is more like an SUV. It's got a little more room on both ends, you know. So I've got more room to work with. I can do pretty much the same thing on both of them, but I really, if I'm going to be working with more than one, if I'm going to work with more than one Heddle, and have like 2 of them involved here, or some pickup sticks or something else, I like to use the wider wheelbase because it gives me more room in the back to do stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask this then. So if you want to, say you want to change the spacing between projects, like your last project was spaced at, I don't know, 12 ends per inch, and your next one is spaced wider at like 8 ends per inch. Can you explain how you do that on your loom?
You start by getting a different Heddle. So
you just swap it out completely.
Yeah, this is a 10. And so much like reeds, it's kind of like they're pre-spaced in a way. So I use the 10 for anything I want to have 10 ends per inch, or if I'm going to use something like 8-2 and I want it at 20 ends per inch, I'll pull 2 threads through each hole and slot. So I double the number of the dent. They come in, there are standard sizes between them. There's also a metric versus English. So
hello.
Ashford is metric. So I have a 7.5, 10, and a 12.5.
Okay.
All the American looms are 8, 10, and 12. So there's a little bit of difference there. It's minute. But you can go down to a 2.5, I think, which is like massive. Like you could put like really chunky yarn through that. And I have a pair of 15s, which I've never actually used.
Okay.
But the common ones are the 7.5, the 10, and the 12.
Yeah. Well, and what I find fascinating is that I can always tell who's asking the question when someone asks a question about spacing, because they'll be like, what kind of reed do I need? Because for us, like I have a 12 dent reed, which means there's 12 spaces in 1 inch. And this is the only reed I have for this loom, period, full stop. So for the spacing, then you either just double up in each of the slots, the dents, or you would skip dents. So I think that's always fascinating because people are like, well, which, do I need to go buy a reed or a Heddle or, however the conversation goes. And I'm like, no. For this style of loom, you need one. That's all you need, because you actually get to control how everything is spaced in the loom itself. So I think that's one of the kind of big differences,
right? Can't you get them sized?
Sure. Oh, you absolutely can. Yes. Yeah. Okay. For my big loom, I have a 12 dent and an 8 dent. Those are the only 2 that I have. So absolutely, yes, you can. But the goal isn't, you don't have to have 1 reed per every spacing, or pretty close. You really, I have an 8 dent just because when I use bigger yarns, kind of like your, the 2 dent or whatever, the 5 dent, that kind of thing. Yeah. I have that when I'm using fatter yarns in the warp versus a 12. Or I have certain projects, those are very common spacings for me at 8 or 12. So that just becomes kind of nice math.
I default to my 10 a lot, but I have the others. Now, here's a mind blower. For the rigid Heddle looms, for some of them, they have a thing you can take it apart and put different size pieces of Heddles in here. Yeah.
So the spacing can change from side to side?
Spacing from side to side, or put different. So I've got one. I'll admit it's kind of a novelty. I don't use it a ton, but I did get one. I only have it for my narrowest loom, the 8-inch wide, or the 10-inch wide one. I'm sorry, because I see that as like a scarfy kind of thing. Yeah. I don't see myself using that necessarily for tea towels or anything like that. So I kind of splurged when I got the little 10-inch samplet and decided to get that too. But it has little pieces. You take it apart, you slide them in the order you want them in.
How fascinating. See, that is awesome.
Very dense. They're kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, and for me, then I would just, skip dents as I needed, or double up, or whatever that looks like. Yeah.
There's been some people who've tried playing with skipping dents. You can do it if you're consistent all the way across. There's people who say that they'll use like 2 12s and they'll put a 10 in the middle. Okay. And somehow they can work 4 shafts that way with that odd ball in the middle, and they're beating with the one they want to have the spacing. I've not actually gone down that rabbit hole. I'm not quite sure. I get it. That I think there's a part of my brain that likes to know exactly where I'm mapping my threads as I'm threading these things. And having that oddball in the middle would drive me nuts. So I'm just like, okay, and also none of these looms that I know of come with space for 3 Heddles to sit together, nestled together. They make a thing you can actually replace this with. You can actually replace these blocks on some of these looms, and that somebody on Etsy's made a 3 Heddle holder. But I'm not about to take my loom apart to put some extra thing on it, you know.
Right. So Michele, let's talk about kind of the strengths of each loom then. So what would you say are the kind of in the plus column? What are the things about the rigid Heddle that you just love?
First off, I mean, in general, they're just cheaper. I mean,
they are cheaper. Absolutely. Yeah. They're absolutely cheaper.
So, you know, your cost of entry is a lot lower than obviously even a table loom. So that's a big plus for them. Also, you know, like right now, I've brought my 3 looms into my bedroom because my spare room my study is being used as a spare bedroom. Gotcha. So I can just move them out and then I can still have someone sleep.
Yeah, right. So easy to transport. Absolutely.
Not necessarily. And I also take all 3 of them to Florida. So I don't have to leave my looms at home when I go away. They can go with me. So that portability aspect is really nice. The stands come apart pretty easily. So I just pack it all up in a couple bags and throw them in the car. Sweet. So those are like 2 of the really big ones. They don't take up a ton of space, you know, and then you've got a lot of variety in what you can use on them because we don't have that really high tension that I think you achieve with your. Interesting. Yeah, I can get good tension. I mean, I can get good enough tension to weave, you know, tea towels and stuff. You've seen them,
of course,
but I don't get the tension that you've got. Got it. I have to fuss with my edges more because I don't have that high tension, right?
Sure. Interesting. Okay.
But then because of that, I can use like a soft singles yarn on here as long as my tension is even. I don't have one like over tensioned or, you know, anything sloppy going on. I can usually get away with even singles on this, which is not usually acceptable, but I found that there's strength in numbers. So that's kind of nice. You know, you kind of have all that flexibility. I can go to the yarn shop down the street at the local yarn shop and get yarn as well as ordering from like, you know, Cotton Clouds or someplace online. So
I love that. Well, okay. And you said something really interesting there is that I would have said that for this style of loom, one of the strengths for sure is just that you can do more complicated patterns. If you like that, like if that's what really drives you, because you have 4 different options where every different yarn, each individual yarn can go. That idea. But what I've learned mostly from you, my friend, is just that you can absolutely modify things for rigid Heddle by having multiple Heddles, by having pickup sticks. Like I think what's so fascinating about rigid Heddle weavers is they've really figured out ways to kind of modify things so that you can get very similar results to what you would on a 4-shaft loom like this.
Yeah, it takes a little more thinking. So the rigid Heddle, when you weave, you've got an up position and a down position, unlike your shafted looms, which are all up. So we kind of have the advantage. I think there's a correlation here in my head. There's always been one. It's like I get the combination of a rising and a sinking shed at the same time. Yeah. So I use 1 Heddle instead of 2 shafts to do plain weave. So I can usually subtract 1. So I can use 2 Heddles to make 3 shafts. Theoretically, a 3rd Heddle would let me make 4 shafts, but I usually don't stick that 3rd Heddle in because it doesn't have a place to sit on the looms. Yeah. So that's when I start throwing in pickup sticks and Heddle rods, and then it changes the game and makes them all lifted sheds.
Right.
But it's fun. I mean, you know, you have to move a couple pieces for each pick, but you can still get, you know, the same kind of shed. So I kind of have sort of like, I'm doing a deep dive into 3 shaft stuff right now because 2 Heddles. Most people have 2 Heddle Heddle block that will hold 2 Heddles. Okay. And then having 2 Heddles isn't out of the question for most people from a price standpoint. Yeah. So then, you know, you can kind of do a lot with that. So I'm going deep down that rabbit hole right now because there's like one book out there that talks a lot about 3 shafts. It's the Eric Trader book, which has been out of print. Oh, okay. It's not written for rigid Heddle. It's a multi-shaft loom book, but it's like the 3 shaft project Bible sort of. Okay. And I'm like, well, okay, if we can do that, we can do a lot of things. So I've been playing with all the different options. But it's kind of nice because you have that complexity. And yet for me, to do it in 3 shafts, I think to take a 4-shaft loom and try to figure out how to do 3 shafts, it confuses people. I don't know why. Because
no, and I don't think so. If you have 4 shafts to do 3, you just leave one out. It's not
just leave one out, right? That's what I thought. But then people are like, how do I do this on my 4-shaft loom?
I'm like, no. That's not
Yeah. I'm like, just follow the draft.
Right. It's just a different, it's just a different way to think about it for sure.
But the rigid Heddle crowd isn't a draft crowd either. So I give them drafts with my projects, and it's extra information. Some folks try to figure it out, and some folks are like, okay, you've told me how to do my Heddle lifts. That's all I want to know. Yeah. So, and that's fine. I mean, everybody's got their own way of doing it. So,
for sure. Well, this has been wonderful. I love the fact that, that we can talk about kind of head to head, both looms. And what the kind of unique properties of both are. And I think, at the end of the day, both of these looms are gonna, you're gonna be weaving fabric. That is the goal. We need to be weaving. So whatever is right for you. If you want to do, if you want something that's very portable, it's less expensive, the rigid Heddle is perfect for that. If you want something that has going to be, so it's a little beefier and it's going to allow you to do more complicated things a little easier. I think that, they both have their pros and cons, but I love the fact that we can kind of look at them side by side and that we can kind of compare the strengths of both of them, because they're both absolutely worthy. I'm like, as long as you're weaving, I don't care what you're weaving on.
I think the thing that's cool though too for about with the multi shaft looms is that how many things you can make at a time. Like of course my attention span is 2 towels. Oh yeah. So I work for 2 towels. So I put on like my average is a 99-inch loom. And I know that there are people in like the Acton Crave group that are putting on like 12 tea towels. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, how long is that? I don't even know how to do the math for 12 tea towels, right?
How do we do that? Yes.
I put 3 on here and it takes me a year and a day to get to 3 because I'm like, I don't want to do a third one. I'm done. I've done it 2. So, you have that option to do much longer pieces.
Yeah.
Which of course, if you're doing things like panels and stuff, makes it just so much easier.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. That's true. I hadn't thought about that. It's a very good point though. Yeah.
Well, because you've got that length, you can just, instead of me having to think, okay, I can only put, say comfortably on my loom 4 yards. I can put more than that, but let's just say that that's what I'm comfortable warping. Yeah. Now I gotta have 3-4 yard panels to make a blanket. How do I make them all exactly the same length? Well, if I could have put 12 yards on and then washed it and cut it all equal lengths, I would have that problem. It's just so much easier. Things like that too.
Right. So, see, I love that.
There are lots of differences, but there's a lot of common overlap, and I think we need to
absolutely. That. I know, right? Cheers. Cheers for all the looms and all the weavers. Yes. So thank you so much for joining me. I've had this idea for a long time. And I was like, I know Michelle's the right girl for this episode. So thank you so much for.
Thank you. Thank you. So
absolutely. Okay. How cool was that? To have both of us with our looms sitting side by side, showing how everything moves, how it functions, talking about the pros and the cons, just the whole overview. It was so much fun to do this episode. And I really hope that it gives you some perspective about what each loom looks like, what is going to be the best fit for you, depending on what you're looking for, what you're after. There's just so much to dive into, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. But I love the fact that we could show you in a visual form what the 2 looms, the 2 styles of looms look like side by side. So I hope that gave you a little something to chew on, especially if you're in the market for a loom and you are pondering what is going to be the best style loom for you. So tell me in the comments, which loom is the one that you prefer? There's no wrong answer. I think that as long as you're weaving, I don't care what kind of loom you're using, but let me know in the comments. Do you have a preference? Which one is your favorite? All right, friends, have a wonderful week. Happy weaving.